sorts of women, and I was wondering what is happening. Of course, women studies scholar, I always looking at the void, the absence, but there is a change here. And in the memorialization also you see women very prominently featured here. So I was writing this article in the Baltic Words about the roots of illiberal memory politics, remembering women of the '56 revolution, and that actually started this book project I'm working on, which is starting with the '56 revolution commemoration, and then going for the Holocaust Memorial Year, and then analyzing the Gulag Memorial Year. And there are common elements here. And here you see the official logo of the Holocaust Memorial Year, and also this infamous statue at the Liberty Square, and also the form of resistance, because this statue also created a form of resistance. So in this very brief talk, what I would like to argue is how illiberal regimes are using the memory politics. It will have a kind of descriptive part, and then I would like to give some theoretical explanations. So this is the chronology of the 2013-2015 memorial year, starting with the formation of the memorial committee, and then certain government initiatives, including the introduction of this new terminology, which has been mentioned already at the opening session, calling the part of the Holocaust a police action against aliens. And then there was the reaction of the Jewish community, announcing a boycott to the government initiatives, which was the most important conflict in the post-45 era of the Hungarian history between the state and the Jewish communities. And then the so-called reconciliation period, when certain funds had been transferred to the Jewish communities. The theoretical framework I would like to use is an article we wrote together with my PhD student Veronika Czabalska, in all places in the Huffington Post. And of course we have a peer-reviewed version which will be read by 220 people, or it has been read by 222 people, just to be positive, and this was read by more than 200,000. And here in this article we actually contributed to this definitional debate. Is it an electoral authoritarian? Is it a mafia state? Is it what kind of other concept? Authoritarian democracy. I mean, there are so many different terminologies, and we actually introduced the concept of the polypore state. The polypore, before you start Googling, this is this mushroom which is living on the trunk of the tree, and it's a kind of parasite, and it only produces more polypores and uses the energy and the resources of the tree. And of course, you very legitimately can say that this is an extremely biologizing kind of metaphor. On the other hand, in this article, we defined three types of modus operandi of this polypore state. One is the creation of an alternative institutions, alternative public sphere, alternative NGO sphere, and if you know the history of what's happening in Poland and in the other countries, you see an alternative system of institutions starting from historical institutions. Then the next one is familialism. Women are just disappearing and everybody's talking about families. And the third one is securitization. And this securitization is actually the only way how certain issues and policy measures are being discussed. So let me connect the concept of the polypore state with the liberal memory politics. That's what I will be doing in the coming 5 minutes. The fundamental law of Hungary, which replaced the constitution, introduced the concept of double occupation, which is not new in the case of the Baltic states, but it's definitely new in Central Europe, which is starting the German occupation on the 19th of March 1944 is considered the beginning of the Holocaust, beginning of losing the country's self-determination, and also as a starting point from the Holocaust. Why is this interesting? Because this particular police action against aliens was happened much before, right? So that is actually the kind of tricky point, and it ends in 1990 according to the this constitution when the Soviet troops left Hungary. So what are the elements of this paradigm change? And I'm actually arguing that there is a paradigm change which was successfully achieved by the Hungarian government in spite of the unprecedented public protests, which had different forms, protests, artistic interventions, creating memorials, creating counter memorials. First is that they managed to nationalize the international discourse. So the Holocaust and the Second World War is a transnational history, and here they were only speaking about the national element. The government stood up as the initiator of anything which happened during those times, so basically controlling the discourse, introducing a new framework. Previously, the Holocaust remembrance was a kind of laic discourse, and now they are introducing sacrality in that remembrance, and introducing new terminology at the same time, like which had been already mentioned, the police action against aliens, which is replacing, like the polypor, right? It replaces certain terminologies. It also had this populist turn, namely that new actors showed up, new historians being appointed, new NGOs had been formed, which had got nothing to do previous Holocaust research, and they were given lavish government funding to do the memorialization. The Holocaust research is a kind of traveling concept. In a sense, if you are familiar with this literature in recent theory, and they are trying to undermine this traveling concept through introducing and supporting mostly the national concepts, rejecting the Holocaust narrative and the Holocaust memorialization as something imposed on the Hungarians. This discourse is also promoting the closure, let's finish and start a new page, against the never again, which is a kind of continuous remembrance discussion. And the last element of this paradigm change is the de-Judaization of the Holocaust, namely that there are not the Jews are simply disappearing from this story, and the Roma coming in, and also the Jewish communities are not participating in this memorialization. So what are the results? First of all, I would like to underline that this memorialization fight happened on different layers and on different spaces. Sometimes the government was more victorious, sometimes the resistance. So the government was successful normalizing this double occupation narrative and creating this closure feeling that let's finish thinking about the Holocaust and then start a new page. Introducing new topics like the Roma Holocaust, or Radnóti, who was born Jewish but was converted to Catholicism and a deep Catholic writer, and also in the symbolic issues like this occupational monument on the Liberty Square is still there, and the director of the Veritas Institute, who was quoted several times in today's discussion, is still the director of the Veritas Institute. What is a standstill is the House of Fate, which is the continuation of this narrative, is still closed at the moment. There are some plans to reopen it, but it's not clear how. But there are some results of the protest, like the financial issues. There are several new cemeteries and synagogues which have been reconstructed, and there is a promise to open the so-called House of Dialogue, which is at the moment not really transparent, and there are certain extreme figures, like I don't need to get into these details, whose inclusion into the national canon was logged and rejected. So in that context, if you are interested more, this is the article I wrote about the Holocaust Remembrance Year, the Hungary 70. This is where you can actually read more, and I just would like to sum up that my argument is that there is a paradigm change in the Holocaust remembrance. These different civil actors have got power to fight against this, but this fight requires certain resources and also the resilience to fight. Thank you.